JOMOCast listeners, Hover would love to find a domain name for your passion. They'll automatically take 10% off your first order at the checkout using promo code JOMOCast. My name is Christina Crook, and I am the author of The Joy of Missing Out. I want to welcome you to the JOMOCast, a brand new podcast for founders and creators seeking joy in a digital age. JOMO is the joy of missing out on the right things. Life-taking things like toxic hustle, comparison, disconnection, and digital drain in order to make space for life-giving commitments that bring us peace, love, meaning, and joy. Did you hear? Oprah said that JOMO is her new favorite thing. Yes, that's right. In a video with her and her bestie, Gayle King, O discovered JOMO for the first time, and she gushed, "JOMO is my new favorite thing. I am definitely JOMO." So here at JOMO headquarters, aka my home office, we are working fast and furious to put together a JOMO care package for Miss O herself. We're sending her a JOMO box to place phones inside, the Joy of Missing Out book, custom Oprah mugs, a tote bag, a manifesto letter print, and a handwritten letter, all in the most bright and beautiful box we could imagine. To see photos, follow at experience_JOMO on Instagram. Okay, back to business. We are halfway through season 1 of the JOMOCast, and this season we are talking about the 2 elements of joy: well-being and success. Success is the achievement of goals, no matter what they are, and well-being is having a positive relationship with our abilities and our limits, no matter what they are. This week, we're releasing 2 special episodes that each focus on one of these elements. I met each of these guests featured this week at Fireside Conference. I first attended Fireside in 2016 with my husband, Michael. Fireside is a gathering of technology founders, investors, and media at a completely unplugged summer camp 3.5 hours north of Toronto. The founders, Daniel Levine and Stephen Pulver, had a vision of creating a true human experience for the women and men of tech. Now in its 5th year, Fireside has become an important part of my life and connection within the tech community. I speak at Fireside every year. To give you a sense of what Fireside is like, I'd like to share a poem I wrote sitting on the dock at Camp Walden, where Fireside happens every year. We are sitting on the deck at Camp Walden. Around us, the rise and fall of laughter mingle on the intersecting planks. A small lake rippling beneath us. The water is littered with sailboats, canoes, and a couple paddling in kayaks. A hedge of elms and oaks engulf the edges of the water, warmed by the gentle nudges of fall. It quiets and moves me, this scene. Here, the cloud cannot touch us. The hurry and labels and Twitterverse for a weekend powered down. Here, we are disarmed. This is Fireside, an opening for flesh and blood communication, for remembering just what lights us up, just what can happen when silence and serendipity are given room. Here is an opening to surrender accomplishments and sleep, to place our successes to the side and watch them dim under the canopy of 1,000 stars. Here, we remember our smallness, just a body on a dock, just a woman in flat shoes, just a man with cold feet. This is Fireside. I met Jessica Brunette and Payam Shalchian at Fireside. Payam, a former management consultant working 70-hour weeks, had little time left for the things that supported his well-being, namely his relationships, especially with his wife Jessica, but also with his extended family and friends. Payam would wake up, as many of us do, to a flood of email messages demanding, our attention. By nightfall, the pressure wouldn't let up. When Jess's sister and brother-in-law shared their vision for opening a bed and breakfast in the country, Jess and Payam were captivated by the idea of living in community and by the freedom to experiment and play in ways that their lives currently didn't allow for. Now co-owners of the Edward Bed and Breakfast, the foursome co-live in the wilds of Ontario's Prince Edward County. My husband Michael and I spoke with Jess and Payam on our anniversary in September, sitting around a picnic table at Camp Walden. We heard how this couple made the choice to slow down and the dividends it's paid to their well-being, marriage, and all-round satisfaction with life. They even keep chickens. I call this episode The Joy of Missing Out on Hustle. We're here at Fireside at Soul's Fire Pit, just a few steps away from Soul's cabin. And it's your first time to Fireside, isn't it?
It is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. How are you finding it so far?
It's so good. It's kind of, I think I had like a rough idea of maybe what this weekend would be like and what it was all about, but it's like totally exceeded all of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really cool.
So we are here today with Payam and Jess, and they have an amazingly interesting story about getting out of the rat race and moving into, a really intentional way of living. We're here sitting talking together because Daniel and Steven, the co-founders of Fireside, called me on the phone yesterday and said, there are these people you absolutely have to talk to. Can we set you up tomorrow afternoon? So
that's too kind.
Yeah. So I think the thread that he was really, Daniel in particular, was interested in is actually Michael, who's joining me today on the podcast. Say hello.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Michael.
We actually co-lived with a family this last year. And you guys co-lived with your sister and brother. So I think that's a thread that I'd like to bring in to our conversation today. But maybe we could back up a little bit. I kind of want to back up to what life was like maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and then fast forward to life today. So maybe you guys can take us a little bit on that journey.
Sure. So I am Jessica, and I am Payam's wife and friend and business partner. And a couple of years ago, I was working with kids in Toronto, like downtown inner city Toronto. And I really did enjoy that work. It was very fulfilling. It was really hard because, families are messy and you get to work with not just the kids, but the parents too, and the grandmas and the aunties and all of that. But I did really enjoy that. But being in the city, like it obviously has its benefits. It's very convenient. There's a lot of opportunity there. Sometimes a little too much opportunity. So what I kind of found was that, specifically with Payam's work, it really did take him away a lot, which I think at the beginning was okay. It was fine. But I think our relationship as a couple suffered for that. And it wasn't through Payam's fault. It was just, that's the name of the game. You work, in the city and it just gets really busy, and then you're available to your job all the time. And then they expect that. And then you have to go on business, everywhere. Yeah. So I think we kind of realized that was kind of breaking us a little bit, not apart, but just like breaking us down a little bit. And, I grew up in a small town. I was very fortunate to have a mother who stayed home to raise us, and that's just how it kind of worked. And my dad was out a lot working, which would have been nice to have him home more. But I grew up in a very calm, open environment, and I don't know. We just kind of wondered, would we be able to create that environment for our kids in the city? Would I be able to stay home even for part of their childhood? Or would we both have to work, put them in childcare? And that's just kind of tricky. And we don't have kids yet, but, we tried to be forward thinking and have some forethought into it. And we just kind of thought can't really do it anymore. So we made the change.
And Payam, what was your life looking like a year and a half ago?
Oh my God. have to.
There's
I
a
have
panic as
to. It
you
has
start to
been.
think about
It
it.
has been a year and a half. I grew up in a big city. I all my life basically I was taught, by my environment and my family, that you have to live toward and live and work towards a goal. Very very tunnel vision. Pick one target and just go after it. Living in a big city was always, keeping me focused and speeding me up towards that goal. And that's the life I knew. That's what I thought was the right thing to do. I never, even paused and stopped to think about any alternatives or what would be a healthier lifestyle until maybe even a year and a half ago. I was working, like I mentioned earlier, as a in the consulting world where you move fast, you stay focused, you deliver. It's very very output focused in a lot of cases. So I was really in that the hamster wheel, just running at full speed, and until I think we talked about it, and it came up through circumstance, and then how it was affecting our dynamics, that I realized, hey, maybe we should look at an alternative. So that's where it was a year and a half ago. I think maybe even on a plane back from San Francisco or LA, thinking how much I traveled that year and how little I'd spend at home, how little time I'd spend at home.
So when you were deep into the work that you were doing previously, like you'd wake up in the morning, and what would that day look like? When did you grab for your smartphone? How much time were you spending in front of your computer? Like, what did that actually look like?
What you would probably you can probably imagine. I would
Don't
wake
hold
up.
back. Just let it like.
No, I mean it
It
is
was
it
constant.
Is, yeah, it is very very. I'd say it's stereotypical, but I would grab my phone first thing in the morning, check my emails, check my messages on 5 different platforms, and make sure I'm connected.
Multiple time
zones, tons of different team members that required my attention, and I was connected pretty much first thing in the morning. I would not eat much in the morning in terms of breakfast, and just grab a coffee, hit the ground running. You go to work, and then you until like 7-8 p.m. some nights. You do the same thing, and you come back home, and you are still connected. You don't let go of that much in the evening, even though you're sitting and thinking, oh, well, I'm spending time, with my partner at home.
But like people, from his work would, and that's just the environment they were in. But they would message him at like when we were going to bed, and sometimes like middle of the night, one of the managers or whatnot has an idea or something. He's got to like get it out there, but it like messages on his phone, and he had to put his phone on do not disturb over the nights because of that. But then as soon as the morning time came, that setting was off.
Even if you're not,
the messages were in.
Yeah, I tried towards the end. I think I tried to be disciplined and then not respond. But even if you don't respond, it's still in the back of your mind. It's still there, that light on your phone blipping, or it's like that people are asking you questions, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to ignore them until tomorrow. But it's still occupying a part of your brain, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think I realized, especially back then when we were in the city and it was just a lot going on. I don't think I realized how much Payam like internalized things as well. Like, you kind of just go through life, and I think you can kind of be passive about it and think like, oh, this is just what's happening. But then there'd be, we're getting candid here, but there'd be like breakdowns, like personal breakdowns where we wouldn't know what to do. And I wouldn't quite understand, all the things that are going on in his head that involved work and personal life. And, I'm thinking like work is just work. Like, why is it such a big deal? And because I didn't necessarily come from that environment. And so I think like a huge drive for me personally was I wanted like a healthier, happier husband and partner, and someone who, I don't know, who I could maybe try and help a little bit better than I could back then. And it was maybe a bit selfish in some ways, that I wanted like just a happier I don't know, partner. If he's happy, then I'm happy, and vice versa, and
He's happy. He's happy.
that's
That's
true.
right. Yeah,
It's true. If
totally.
he's happy, then he's a happy person. And that means there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
And
I think the personal breakdowns, and I appreciate the candidness, but is something that everybody can relate to. Mental health is something that, we're speaking a lot more about these days, but there is still sort of this valor to pressing on, keeping up status quo, keeping constantly busy, but there's so much behind the scenes that we're not actually seeing.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think we just kind of thought that was normal until it wasn't. Until we were like, this can't be the way that things function.
It is normalized, though. I feel
It's
like,
normalized,
there's only, more and more you see people trying to break out of that. But when you are in a city like Toronto doing what we did before, you're working amongst hundreds of people. That's your social, thousands of people in a social group that who are thinking that is normal. That is the life they've chosen and they've selected, and they're living it, hopefully happily. But that is the way to do things. It is very normal to get your haircut at the office, because we have a barber coming in, and giving you a haircut. And it was like, well, since when is that normal?
It sounds cool, oh, amazing. I don't have to, do any work. I don't have to schedule my own haircut or, schedule a massage or whatever. My work does that for me. But it's this strange illusion of, let's pamper you because these are just normal things you can't do anymore on your off time because you don't have off time, and because you don't have a life outside of the office,
right?
And it's I mean, I appreciate that work environments are trying to do that, but it's we keep hearing there's got to be a balance, and even a work environment in a really intense techie agency kind of environment, I feel like they could find that balance. Really, it's got to come from the core, but as an individual, it's hard. If you what do? You either just kind of keep going and you try and find happiness in it, and that's great. And I really appreciate people who can do that. But yeah, I mean, I like cutting your hair. I like it when you're home and I can cut your hair.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful segue. Well, the theme of this podcast is, of course, the joy of missing out, and that can manifest in lots of different ways. And that's why I love that it's not necessarily digital or technology specific, but I feel like you guys have really embodied stepping into the joy of missing out on what is really normalized, at least in the culture that you guys were working in.
Yeah.
I guess to share a bit of a personal story towards the end, I started realizing that I was missing out on things that actually mattered. I think it hit me when my uncle got sick, and he passed away. And my brother and I drove all the way to DC to see him right before he passed away, and I realized that we were a lot closer to him growing up, and then all of a sudden I was missing out on all of this time I could have spent with him, right? Things that really mattered, I was missing out on, and I had replaced them with things that didn't really matter, right? So I was really just shifting it. I was like, maybe I can miss out on all of this stuff and just really connect back with things that matter a little bit more, like family, like friends, and people we care about,
And what was the crisis point for you with your uncle? Was it that you just had this awakening that you had not been as deeply connected to him in the latter years?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot that goes into your mind when you're driving for 10 hours straight and back. It was a crazy drive, and all of that went through my head. Yeah, all of that. And it was like I missed out on probably 20 years of not actually knowing him. And what
I think I'm hearing you say is that the trade-off wasn't good enough.
Absolutely.
What you were doing with your time.
It was not worth it at all. It wasn't. It was not even. It wouldn't even get close.
Okay, so let's fast forward now to the night of the bottle of wine. Tell us about
Multiple bottles.
So we do work with my sister and her husband, and then their two little ones. So it is a partnership, and we've always been very close with them. Payam was roommates with my sister, and they, the three of them, they went to university together. So we've always been quite close. It's always been we were always called the four. And so we would often gather for dinners at one of the apartments, and
this is in Toronto at this point.
Yeah, in Toronto, and one of these dinners resulted in us going to Cuba. But this particular
you sound like
dinner,
really good dinners.
I
How do
know.
I get invited to these dinners?
This particular dinner resulted in deciding to like explore, like, oh, let's go visit the county. This was in November, so it's not even peak season. It wasn't particularly warm. But let's go visit and like let's just check out some properties. Let's just see, because you never know. And that's what we did. And we ended up staying in a B&B that was for sale. And the owners were, very generous with and candid with their life and how things are run and what, the ins and outs of running a B&B. And my sister and her husband had previous dreams of running a B&B one day that originally was going to be called the White Maple Lodge. That name changed since, but so they kind of had that in the back of their minds anyway. And stemming from that dinner, from that trip to Prince Edward County, it was just like, no, we're going to do this because why the heck not? Like, I think we were all afraid that if we didn't do it now, we would just never do it. And, we were like, it's not like we couldn't go back if this fails.
Right.
And I think, that is like a huge barrier, right? Like, oh my God, what if we fail? For everybody, really, the fear of failure is huge.
The first 3 months, I think, are like we repeatedly told each other, "What's the worst that can happen?"
Yeah,
that was kind of like our way of encouraging us to keep going. We were like, "What's the worst that's going to happen?"
Yeah.
I think that dinner it's kind of funny because for me it was perfect timing. I had a rough time. I had a rough week. I was so ready to just flip my desk and get out of the office already. And at the same time, so I knew I hated the current state of things, but I didn't really know what the heck I wanted to do. I was always like thinking about, oh man, I could do so many things. I think you were the same too, Jess. Like you were like, I could be happy doing so many things.
Yeah.
We didn't really have a place to go, and it was I think very fortunate that we had the other two, Rebecca and Manoli, who already had this kind of like fantasy of doing something like this. They didn't have a plan, and I think when we sat at dinner and we started kind of venting, we were like, well, you guys have a dream, we don't have one, we can help you come up with a plan, why don't we just go in on it together? And that things just kind of went from there. Like Jess was saying, we ended up just like by chance walking into someone's home that was willing to share with us the ins and outs of their business, and that expedited everything because we saw the numbers, and then we said, hey, look at this, we could totally do this. And then what's the worst thing that could happen?
So you go to Prince Edward Island, not the island, the county. I'm from Vancouver originally, so when I think PE, it's going to be an island
with an I.
Yeah. Prince Edward County. You go there, you stay in a bed and breakfast, and the bed and breakfast you stay in is for sale.
Yeah,
like, this is how this worked out.
It's a sign.
Yeah, it's a sign.
we didn't end up buying that bed and breakfast.
We didn't.
You didn't. Okay.
We didn't buy that
but
one.
It expedited everything. Like we ended up talking to them. We went back and started the process with our agent, talking to them. And for a few different reasons, we didn't choose that property, but we were already on a roll. So we were already in the shopping mode, and we just happened to see the perfect house. So
it's a big change, right? So I bet we could find a lot of people who felt the way you did about your work, Payam, and had dinners like the one you had 5 years ago, and they're still in that job, still feeling those frustrations. What do you think gave you guys whatever it was you needed to actually like get an agent, buy a property, launch a business?
I think it was the fact that we had the support, that we were doing it with our closest, family and friends, people that we trusted, people that we knew were responsible people, and that had very similar values to us, and similar goals for their life. And
it's key to have. It's funny, like when you have two people, you could either agree or disagree or something,
and
right?
you can psych yourselves out of it a lot easier. Because as a couple, especially, you come to an agreement fairly quickly. So if one of you is nervous, the other one gets protective and wants to make sure that they're not nervous. So as a
But as soon as you add a third person, or even in our case, even better, fourth person, then at any given point, even if 3 of us are down, there is one person
Someone's
that's
still
like,
gonna
let's
make
go.
it happen.
Like,
Yeah, there's
someone's
always
gonna make
one
it
of us
happen.
at least that are like, we're like, no, we've got this. We can do it, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
I think, and I think we have had times where all 4 of us were kind of defeated, you know, and that's okay. But with 4 people, there is a chance that one of you is going to bounce back quicker, and then pull the other ones out as well. And then I think that's probably why I would recommend people who want to get out of it, do it with other people who also want to get out of it. Don't do it alone, because you know it's tough. Like you're battling inertia at a personal level, right? You know, I gotta change, right? Change is never easy. You are battling, you know, a relationship dynamic changing. There's so much going on. You don't want to do it alone. It's
and we made this decision as well, like during a time in our marriage where we were coming out of some like tough stuff, and I actually think that maybe that's partially why this kind of worked and kind of happened, is because we were like, this is a change that we feel like we need, and we kind of like, it was like something that we could work together on, and I mean, it's hard going through issues, like, you know, at a very personal, like even within your marriage and whatnot, but like going through hard things sometimes results in something really, really good and really positive. And, you know, like no one ever like got a really happy outcome out of doing like nothing, you know, and out of going through nothing. And so
one of the things I wrote down when you guys were talking a few minutes ago is failing for all the right reasons. You know, it was like, you know, it was worth stepping out with the possibility of failure, because even if you did, you would be doing it for all the right reasons. And I hear your story, and I think a lot of people can relate if they have a partner, which, you know, many people have a partner, that their lives are sort of running parallel, you know, especially we're here at Fireside, we're surrounded by, you know, startup founders and people that are at C-level, you know, in C-level positions. A lot of them don't actually spend a lot of time with their partners simply because there's just not enough hours in the day. And I think part of the dream that at least I connect to, and Michael and I have wanted more and more in our own life, is finding more ways to be together, to work together, to be even community as a family more. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful part of your story, that it brought you into community with each other, but then it also brought you into this greater community of your family. This episode is brought to you by Hover.com. Everyone's got their thing. My thing is the joy of missing out, and Hover's is the joy of free domain registration privacy. Hover is an incredible company, actually based here in Canada, which is where I live, and I use Hover for all of my domain registration, and I have for years and years. I'm thrilled that they are here on board with the JOMOCast in the very first season. And as a listener, you can go to hover.com/JOMOCast to get your next great idea registered in a domain at Hover. So thank you to Hover for sponsoring season 1 of the JOMOCast. So you move to the country, and what does that look like? Who are you living with? What is?
My God.
Yeah. Okay.
It was messy. it was messy. We had partially why we bought this house was because it had a separate space that we saw ourselves being able to live in while we ran it as a business. So we could live on site.
It was an unfinished kind of like shoddily put together space above the garage, which was attached to the house, but somebody finished it on their own.
It was
not a contractor.
We did see the space, and we said, "Hey, let's move in." All of us, all 4 of us, plus a new 5
baby.
months old. What could go wrong, you know? And so we did. We moved all of our stuff.
Firstly, my sister and I, she was on mat leave. I quit my job earlier in the year.
That's true.
So my sister and I moved there in March, just the 2 of us. We do not have our licenses yet, our full licenses. So here's my sister and I in this giant house on this giant property with a baby by ourselves during the week because the boys were still working in Toronto, and then living in the place that Payam and I had. So like at one point, 4 of us were living in a place in Toronto all together. And then my sister and I moved out to the county. Once in a while, my mom would visit and help us start to, get the house ready and clean it. And we were painting and all of that. And she drove us around, which is super helpful. And then the guys would come on the weekend. So Friday night, they'd arrive late. And then Sunday, they'd have to go back. And so they were doing the grind, plus working on the weekends in the county.
Yeah, it was rough.
And living in, a small space, living in the same space.
Because you were trying to get the main house ready, is that right?
Yeah, the house was under basically not major construction, but we were doing painting and decorating and all that kind of stuff. So sleep, all five of us, and sometimes parents sleeping in the same concept space was challenging.
At one point there was the four of us, my parents, Eva, who is my sister's first daughter, and it was crazy. We were all kind of on the floor on mattresses. None of our beds were really there yet, and
you get to know
your family really
well.
Dream from day one.
From day
was
one.
exactly what everyone had envisioned.
That's to imagine, right?
And even to this
the
date,
grandparents.
I think you get to know your family really well. I think. And we did that for the first year, by the way, just to give you a bit of context. So we did put up some drywalls in that space to divide it into.
Wall?
We actually put one wall really to divide it into two and have either side for the couples. That was the level of privacy that we created.
But our room was a throwaway to their room.
It was basically to get
Eva
to
would be like, "Morning!" She would just kind of bolt into the room and
the bathroom.
So privacy wasn't a thing. Much of a thing, it was rough.
It was easier,
messy.
I think, for Rebecca and I because we grew up together. We grew up very close. We would share a room or swap rooms. We shared bathrooms. You
were already sisters.
We were, exactly. And so, living together, we secretly, even now, still kind of go oh my God, how did we trick our husbands into moving out here and living together? How did this happen? So for us, it wasn't as big of a deal, but it was more the dynamics of squashing, for adults, but also my relationship with my brother-in-law and Rebecca's relationship with Payam.
Mm-hmm.
My brother-in-law's name is Manoli. Have not mentioned that yet. Hi, Manoli. And so that was interesting. And I think my sister and I we didn't really think that far. We did not think about that dynamic. We were this is amazing. We get to live together again, and I get to be with your babies all the time. And I think it was after we found out that they were pregnant with their second baby that we realized, okay, I think we need some separation and privacy, and they need a properly finished space for their family. We need our own space because, you're a couple.
You need your own space.
Because you need your own space.
It's a kind of an amazing thing. Because this is an audio medium, people can't see me doing all this nodding while you're talking. But
you guys get it.
Yeah, we had dreamed of living with another family for almost our entire marriage, and so when the opportunity. Right.
We talked about it. It was always something we were curious about. What would that be like?
Right. And so there's sort of the dream and then the reality.
Yeah.
But I kind of often describe it as similar sort of to marriage, right? You have all of this anticipation and joy and excitement, and then all of a sudden
reality.
There you are.
and it's
together,
work.
And
there's things that pop up that you're wasn't expecting that.
Right. And there's some things that are so much better because you're
Of
together,
course,
and there are other things that are just so much harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think we are getting better at creating that space, and I don't mean necessarily just a physical space, even just giving each other space. I think it's essential, and taking your time as a couple to have your own space.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're still learning
having
that.
a separated physical space. We ended up just renting another apartment for us, the two of us, because we don't have kids yet, so it's easier for us to commute all of 9 kilometers from our apartment to our house.
And
but
we were
that
all day too.
we do spend
pretty
most
much live
of
there
the
still.
day at the house, and in the evenings. But that separation, the physical space, has allowed us to create a lot of space for ourselves, to have the time, in our commute for those 9 kilometers. We get to debrief, or in the mornings, just prep for the day. We get that sort of disciplined routine of every day. That it has helped. It's been incredible.
Yeah, it's been the best decision we made for for personally and for the business, as a whole. And not because we don't care for one another or anything, and, or enjoy spending time, because we spend time together all the time. It's just like, it is important to have just that little bit of, I would say that's a good word, like that little sanctuary that you can create for yourselves, either individually or as a couple or in whatever capacity. But and so that was kind of missing. And because I think a lot to do with the fact that because our home was our business, so all of us living there, all of us working there, it was just, we were on all the time. And then our downtime was still filled with like being social and, being together. And I think it was hard to find that even individual time, like, or time to even just sometimes sit there and like be with your own thoughts. And,
we
without
had
people running around.
A similar experience for a different reason. We weren't running a business out of our house, but both our families had kids. And
that's the thing. You both had kids. And,
two sets of kids in the same house means that there's a level of vigilance as a parent. You're always just listening and waiting and seeing what's going to happen and ready to jump in if there's a challenge. And that takes just a huge amount of energy.
Did you find it hard not to parent the other children?
We had lots of conversations with the other parents about like, okay, how much of that, but at what point how far do we go parenting their kids? What is their approach?
But we made a decision really early on that we would view the kids as just the kids. Like we were not stepping in because it wasn't our child. We had to sort of have the same rules across the board. So if something was happening, we would step in, but that also builds like a security in the children to know that, we're there for them regardless of what's happening. And so, but yeah, definitely that was one of those things where we thought this will just all work out fine.
Yeah.
We were actually worried about, are we actually going to be good friends with these people? What is it going to be like for the couples and hanging out at night? Are we going to actually get along? That worked out. And like the labor break,
we may have forgotten there were children when we decided to do
really
this.
planned for like, how are the kids going to, they were the same ages or similar ages. So we thought they're just going to be best friends.
That's what we assume eventually when we have kids, that our kids will be best friends with.
Yeah, it might not happen.
All these kids, but it may not happen.
But it might happen. I think where I'd love to sort of end our conversation today is what is it like? So you've opened the B&B. Tell us what is it called?
It's called the
B&B?
Edward.
Oh, yeah. The Edward. The Edward Bed and Breakfast.
And like, what is it like? Who comes there, and what is it like for your guests when they? I mean, I expect a lot of them are coming from Greater Toronto. These are a hardworking
that's
men and women.
A lot of people who come there are basically people who relate to this story very, very well. A lot of people from Toronto come there, and we try and guide them through that sort of upfront experience of sometimes getting to the county and then understanding what the county is about. They reach our place, and a lot of times the reaction is like, wow, it's beautiful up here. If it's their first time, especially.
For us.
and they talk about the area looking like, south of France or Italy. It is quite a nice area. Lots of wineries around. So, and then they come to our house, and then, it's peaceful. You don't have any sirens or car noises. You hear the nature and the wind, and that's usually very, it catches people a little bit off guard when they get off their cars.
We also have a very long driveway. So the drive, like, I think some people actually mistake our driveway for a road because we see a lot of cars turning back. So they come in and then they turn back real fast.
Yeah.
But so I think the lead up to getting to the house is kind of nice for guests. I know that was one of the features that we loved about the house as we drove down this driveway, and then all of a sudden there's this nice big yellow house, and it was so kind of had a romantic feel to it.
It's a good entrance.
And I think guests, they quite like that. We often get people wanting to take pictures in front of the house because it's just kind of an icon now. Like,
and we try to create a space where it's it's transparent. It's very very much outside inside sort of mix. The outside is brought inside as much as possible. Lots of light and lots of air and lots of life. So that hopefully continues. As they enter the house. The rest of that is basically, making sure they have a place to stay and sleep comfortably. We we thought, it's in the name, bed and breakfast. So we made sure we have the best beds and the best beddings, and we have good breakfast. We thought if we get those two things right, we are probably doing something right. And I think we've tweaked things over time a little bit, and I think we're at a good spot where we have really good beds where everyone, people check in usually later in the day, and then so we don't get to see them or talk to them too much that day, other than just, this is where you're going to get your dinner. It's good food around us. The next morning they wake up and they see, the light coming in and the nature around them. Sometimes the odd deer walking in the backyard, and it's
turkey. We get wild turkeys.
Wild turkeys,
yeah,
or wild turkeys. That's usually the start of their wow. This is actually kind of cool, And then we put good food in front of them. We try to make everything there. Certain things we haven't figured out yet, but we are on our way to be fully self-sufficient in terms of our food. So people appreciate that. People who are coming from Toronto and big cities, they appreciate good food. And then we fill them up with good food, and we set them off on their day. We sit down with them and just kind of tell them where everything is on a map, what they can do for their day, help them with the planning a little bit, because they're there for a couple of days and there's so much to do. What can I do here?
One thing that's kind of fun to note is that we don't have any televisions in our B&B, so we've got Wi-Fi. So a lot of people will bring like a device or something, but we purposefully made that choice. I mean, you can buy TVs; they're not that expensive nowadays. But we wanted to get rid of that option, because you can go into a place and then you end up, what are we doing tonight? Oh, it's just like turn on the TV, right? So all of our rooms are very tailored to like sleep there, enjoy, be cozy, and read a book, be together, enjoy. There's common spaces that you can also be a part of, and we've got a record player, and we wanted it to be very
visceral,
and tactile, be there and enjoy it. I guess what you're all about, the joy of missing out, the joy of not. It's missing out to find something else, either yourself
we have played around with the idea of leaving a basket at the door where people can drop off their phones and pick it up on the way out when they're checking out.
People may not like that.
I mean, it could
not
be
a
requirement,
right?
It's optional.
It's optional, but we have had a few times where people, especially I guess older couples who are staying with us, they take a moment, they double take. Where's your TV? And we're like, I actually don't have a TV. You can sit on the back porch and read a book. You don't need to watch the news
tonight. Nothing worse is happening than what's already happening right now. It's okay.
All the bad stuff is already happening.
Yeah.
So,
I hear you guys sort of describe the environment, and I just imagine it inducing spontaneous detoxes for people from their technology. What's it? Do you see that with people, that they're a little maybe calmer or quieter?
Yeah, people are generally,
or other people more anxious because there's no TV. What's that like?
I think there's a lot of people on their phones, their heads are kind of down and on their phones, and that's just how it's going to be, But it's kind of nice, I love seeing when people wake up in the morning, they go onto the back porch, because that has the view of our backyard and then the forest. And I love it when people don't have their phones on them and they just kind of sit there with a cup of coffee and they're just talking. Because it's incredible how much you don't talk with a friend or a partner or whoever, right? You kind of just forget to do that, just to reconnect. And
we set up our breakfast table. This was not really by design. We just didn't have a whole lot of space. So we have an area where it gets light from all around. It's a sunroom essentially, and we made a choice to put a communal table. There's no separate. You can't sit separately,
whether they know each other or not.
So you sit at a long table, kind of like this, maybe a little longer, around a table, eating with complete strangers who are also staying there, and it's incredible the kinds of conversations and people are not on their phones, and the odd connections that they make with each other. It's
kind of cool.
And then you're standing as whoever is doing the breakfast that morning, you're standing behind a bar making people good coffee, and these conversations just kind of happen, and that is fascinating to watch. That's one of the moments of detox you're talking about, is at the breakfast time, like everyone starts connecting in a way, not always. I'm not gonna,
and that's totally fine. Like,
and
some
sometimes
guests are
people
very
keep to
reserved
themselves and bring their, global mail to the table, and that's okay too. We don't force it, but that's one moment. And the other moment is usually in the evenings. When people come back from their full day out, they usually have had some wine, either they've gone on tasting or they've gone to restaurants, they've had some drinks, and they come back, and, a few times, you go into our living room and all of a sudden all of our guests are just there drinking wine together and talking about whatever it is. And we don't interfere with that. We just step out and we go do our own things. That's beautiful just to watch. You're like, well, we have 6 people here in this house that didn't know each other, and now they know each other and they're talking about, whatever.
Not only have you guys created that kind of connection for yourselves, but you've created it for other people.
We're allowing,
you've set the table.
That's what we were, I think, kind of trying to go for. We were like, well, this is how we like to live our life now. Like, there are days when I will have to get someone to call my phone because I'm like, I don't know where it is. It's somewhere.
I relate to that feeling.
Yeah, but like, I haven't looked at it
Michael can
all day. And like, that's my favorite. Actually, it makes me laugh in a very happy way that, when I can't find my phone, I'm like, that means I've spent such like little time on it, which is wonderful. But yeah, like trying to kind of live very mindfully and connected. And then if we can live like that and run our business, then it's like a little extension for people maybe, and they can kind of pick up on that and kind of figure that out for themselves.
Things, at home.
I think the thing that struck me when you were telling the story was that you were really clear on what wasn't working in the life that you had and what you wanted to move away from, but you didn't have something that was pulling you towards it. Like the B&B wasn't your vision that you'd had for years, but hearing you talk about it, it has, I think, sort of swallowed you up a little bit. And I just know, talking to people who do want to make these kind of changes, often they feel like they can't do it until they know what their thing is, and they feel like they don't know what their passion is.
Absolutely.
But that didn't stop you guys. So what's it been like, sort of falling in love with your sister's vision for this B&B?
It's like taking your own part of it and making it yours and running with it. Like for Payam, I mean,
I found my calling. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like you're saying, I had no vision. And my friends and I talked about this all the time. Like, what's the purpose in your life? And, same as your company, you have to have a why in your life. And I always struggle. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And this allowed us, because it created a kind of like a platform, right? Like it created an opportunity for us to be a little bit more free in our minds, to figure out what it is that calls us.
And I think that's
now
important.
It's giving me the chance to actually do it or get closer to it. I love growing food, and I didn't know that before. And I love gardening, and I never gardened before. And my mom did, and I was always influenced by that, but I actually never grew anything. And now I'm like, this is my calling. Like I want to actually cultivate the land we live on, to an extent that we can eat healthier, our guests can eat healthier, and hey, if it makes us some extra money on the side and a market, that's great.
You just genuinely. It's laborious, right? Like you work hard at it, but you actually love it. Like I'll go find you in the garden and you're like, your hands are all messy and you've got dirt all over your face. And there's a whole pile of tomatoes and kale, like in this basket. And he's like chasing off a chipmunk somewhere, but like he never looks upset about it. He's always just kind of like, that's
got a smile on his face, just like right now.
The chipmunks do get frustrating, but I think it's not so much. I guess the bed and breakfast part of it wasn't our vision, like you said, but it allowed us to actually find out what it is, and
it was
not just find out, but also allows us to do it. And we were like, well, I'm gonna do this now. But
you listened to a gut feeling that something needed to be different, and I think that's wonderful that we pulled that out, because I think you're so right that Michael, that I think a lot of people don't take the step because they don't know what to do next, but actually it is possible to step out not knowing. And it is okay also to step into other people's vision. It doesn't always have to be your own. And I think the beauty that I'm hearing in your story is actually that was a gift, because you were in community and you could pull each other up when one of you were feeling down and you weren't just trying to do it on your own, which seems to be one of the really beautiful threads.
We often joke about, because our friends, they'll come to visit us, and they love what we've done, and they always say how proud they are of us and for just kind of doing it. And we always joke now, it's a running joke, that we will one day have a commune. And people will just live in community on this property. And,
and we're going to have our own country established.
People will just figure out what makes them happy while they're there. And I mean, it's a joke, but realistically, like, that's
there's
a little
land.
bit. Yeah. And that's a little bit what we've done. Like, we relied on, and I think that's one thing that people are missing out on, is relying on other people. Like, rely on your community, rely on the people who you feel safe with, who you can trust, and who are there to support you, and, don't overbear them, but also, rely on people. It's okay. It's okay to not have it figured out. It's okay to not be this, like, strong, tall, independent tree. They're like, trees kind of grow in clusters for a reason. And because, and we're stronger together. It's a cliche, but it's true.
Yeah, I think people are too busy being afraid of not having a vision that they forget what they should worry about is not trying, like not testing something out, right? Like I always, like, my biggest fear has always been, like, growing older and then retiring, looking back, and I've done one thing for all of my life, and then I wasn't happy doing it. That it is a real anxiety for people not to be like, oh, well, I don't have a vision, I don't know what I want to do next. That it overtakes them. They forget that even though that's a valid feeling, what they need to really be focused on is actually action, and then doing something, and changing things, and then, maybe quitting your job, maybe changing things at your workplace, whatever it may be, just do something about it. That often goes unnoticed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. It is mine and Michael's anniversary. I can't imagine spending it in a better way.
Amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah. You said 11 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is no small feat. That's amazing.
Congratulations, guys.
And just before we wrap up, maybe we should remind people what the name and location and maybe a website for
the Edward Bed and Breakfast. And where can people find you?
Yeah, online they can find us at theedward.ca. Fairly easy to remember, the website. And you can find us on Instagram as well at the Edward PC.
We see photos there of your kale and tomatoes.
You certainly
wide brim hat.
You certainly can. You can see us, hear our story, follow our story, talk to us, ask questions, and
book a visit.
And book a visit if you like.
Come and stay a while, and we'll talk in person. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And we're bunk buddies. We're all bunk
I know,
buddies.
that was kind of a fun
cabin meeting here.
Well, thank you for listening. You can learn more about our guests in the show notes and by visiting JOMOCast.com. The JOMOCast is edited and produced by Thomas J. Inge, musician and composer by day, podcast ninja by night. Special thanks to writer Rebecca Wigand, musician Peter Katz, and educator Adam Kaplan for their practical and moral support creating this season of the podcast. The JOMOCast is listener supported. When you sign up as a patron at patreon.com/JOMOCast, you'll get access to mini bonus episodes with me and digital sociologist Dr. Jess Puriam. Plus, we'll send you a JOMO Manifesto letterpress print, stickers, and a handwritten card in the mail because I believe in the power of the personal. Plus, snail mail is just one of the most joyful things on earth. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you subscribe. And a 5-star review would be spectacular. Do you want more JOMO? Go to experiencejomo.com to sign up for a free week of JOMO quests to get you started on your journey. As always, remember, there is joy missing out on the right things. I'm your host, Christina Crook. Thanks for listening.